So I'd highly recommend those on YouTube. But essentially what we're trying to do with the saddle is we're trying to mitigate damage. As we said, they're not designed for us to ride them. So my job is pure mitigation. I'm never going to make your horse move better than they can without a rider and without a saddle. So I'm just trying to reduce the damage. We're trying to address physical forces, like we were saying, Jean-Luc Cornille addressing physical forces, tensegrity, which I know some people debate as to whether it's a real thing, but fascial connection,
very much in the paradigm shift, and
yes,
it just, for me, it makes sense.
I think it's a much more useful model of what we're feeling and what we're working with, even if it turns out not to be completely the right model.
It's very much in its infancy with the horse.
Yeah, and Jean-Luc is
humans
out there.
Human side is progressing faster, but there's not a right there for the horse side of it. But
so we're trying to utilise, like I talked about with the ground recoil forces, try and utilise everything that's around us and with the horse, everything we do to make things easier. And it's a better version of, make the right choice easy and the wrong choice hard. No, lots of stuff is hard. We don't need to make anything harder. We just need to facilitate better work. Because every time we work a horse through a problem, we're working in the problem and we're strengthening the dysfunction. So just flag that up. One of the little tidbits I use a lot of the time. So we're better off just finding a tiny improvement and achieving that. So trying to help the horse and rider resist physical forces. So we've got forces going up and down from the horse. We all know about those, sitting trot. We know about accelerative forces, deceleration. So the accelerative ones into extended trot, I need a high cantle behind me. I'm just using these as, ideas. And the rotation of the rib cage. I need to, I don't know what people think might help them with that. Maybe a monoflap that they can hang on, and maybe a narrow twist, and then there'll be a little bit kind of here, a bit more like a clothes peg on the horse. And there are ideas about how we can resist physical forces, but we're not talking about them properly. So if we have a 3-point seat, and I'm sure this is the basis of Sylvia Locke's 3-point seat work, that actually the reason it works is because it addresses lateral forces, so your centrifugal forces, you go around a corner, which the horse isn't able to resist when it's in counter rotation, i.e. left bend, right ribcage rotation. We're then a lever on the top, just as you described.
Yeah.
And those riders that have short body and long legs have a bit more of an advantage here, but I'm long body, shorter legs. And of course we just exacerbate, we multiply the forces applied to the horse. So that centrifugal force, that's a tricky one. It's quite interesting that if we are properly on our 3-point seat, and I should have brought my pelvis, but you'll find I might have some other videos about the pelvis, but I will do one. I'll describe it in more detail. But we have our seat bones, and then we have these bones that run up to the front. So it's a bit like a wishbone in a chicken, that sort of shape, with our bodies being at the top. And so we want all of that in contact with the saddle. Now, if it is like a tripod. If you rock back on the tripod to lift your pubic arch, and you literally could do that on a tripod, sitting on a 3-legged stool, then you've got to balance it and hold it. If you can sit properly on the tripod, you're stable. We kind of all understand that. The difference is that most of us have to, or a lot of us have to go into anterior tilt in order to be on the tripod. And then what happens is our discs aren't stacked level. So the discs in our spine are compressed, either in a hollow back, they're compressed on the back. If we slouch, then they're compressed on the front. And I'm sure there's more to it than this, but certainly the discs can't do their shock absorbing job. The pelvis can't move up and down inside the body in the same way. Any movement is going to destabilise you. So, neutral pelvis, which is different for everybody, and simply means there's a functional stacking of the spine above it, and supported and comfortable, because if we're in pain, we'll be tense. So, if the horse goes into extended trot, we are less likely to get left behind if we are supported in our pelvis, and the curve of the saddle is correct for us front to back. There is a little bit extra, which is support from the back, and this is where people end up going and getting high cantles. Now, if you understand anything about physics, you'll understand that if I've got that and I do that, that is leverage. And whatever is underneath that, if you had a T and pressed on there, what happens here? That is pressure into the horse. And we have panels going out behind that high cantle. And the higher the cantle, the longer those panels should potentially be, depending on your model of saddle fitting. But a low cantle doesn't need such big rear gussets normally. So the rider relies on the cantle to catch them and stop them being vulnerable to accelerative forces. Yeah. What happens then is that this high cantle, the way that we make saddles, on the whole, the curve becomes steeper.
Right.
The curve has to start sooner and go higher. The lower cantle, the curve can either start later or simply doesn't go as high. So what happens is the accelerative forces, we tend to drift backwards anyway. And I can't prove it right now, but the better that your pelvis fits the saddle, the less you suffer from the accelerative forces anyway. So you drift back in the saddle, you hit this cantle, and what happens when you go back and back and back and you hit this fixed, you'll push forward. So the pelvis is tipped forward. Now what happens to the hip joint when we're pushed into anterior tilt? The hip will want to close, because if we allow the hip to stay open, we're going to be unstable. So the hip has to close to bring the knee up to stabilise us. What do we then do? Well, we don't want the leg coming forward.
Yeah.
So we put on big blocks. So that's what's going on there. So then we put on a big block. The body wants to come forward, the leg wants to come forward, we force the leg to stay down, and we jam the hip open, and we jam the riders back into anterior tilt.
But energy never disappears, is what's the phrase? Energy is always just
recycled.
Converted. So presumably it's recycled up the rider's spine. Is that where the back pain comes from? Because if you're fixed here, you know, that's going. Is that why we see the nodding heads?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a diagram on my Facebook page which I post periodically, and it's by a guy who I think sadly died recently, Eric Dalton in the States, who is all about fascia. And it shows that our ankles should be mobile, our knees should be stable, our hips should be mobile, our thoracic middle and middle should be firm, so lumbar spine really should be firm, so stable, and then our thoracic girdle, and I often end up saying thoracic sling, like I say hindgut for humans, God help me, so thoracic girdle should then be mobile. And if we don't have a mobile thoracic girdle, then we see either bouncing hands or nodding head or both. Yeah. But it starts at the foot and at the pelvis, and it goes in every direction, and it refers round around the body. So for instance, we might argue against a hinged stirrup, because if your ankle is supposed to be mobile and you put it onto a hinged stirrup,
you take away.
Add in, and we won't get into proprioception, but add in the fact that that's your only proprioceptive feedback that your body is used to, because we don't have proprioceptive feedback in the same way from sitting on the saddle. We get proprioceptive feedback from our feet. So if you've made the earth move every stride,
then you're unbalancing yourself.
Your poor brain, all your systems are going, where the hell am I? Where are my physical forces? How do I react against them? So it's one of the few pieces of kit I generally advise against. If you've got fused ankles, if you've got really bad knees and they help and you can't change your saddle, you can't do anything else, then they might work, but they're not going to be what I would ever recommend. So that's the deep seat big blocks. That's where it comes from. And what we're doing is we're supporting the rider from non-skeleton parts of the body. We're supporting buttocks and we're jamming knees in. If you start from the basis of a stabilised pelvis, everything else becomes possible.
Yeah, and I'd say that stabilised skeleton helps me understand that point you're making better, because stabilised pelvis, people think there's muscle, lots of everything. But if the skeleton of the pelvis is stable, everything else can kind of check out, switch off until we need it switched on. Deliberately.
And I know you've got an experience at the moment in the saddle that after a chat of ours yesterday, you had a bit of a light bulb moment.
Yeah, I went for a hack. There was a lot of information to process yesterday.
Sorry, I'm like that. Overload.
Trying to take it all in. And just been a bit more aware. So I have found that, and I do need to get my saddle checked anyway, but I've very much got a backward tilt on my saddle. I like to go forwards
It's the opposite to
anyway, so it just encourages that. But then through my pelvis, so you'll be able to talk more about it, but my right side feels okay and fine, whereas my left side, I'm clamped through my thigh and not able to get my left leg on unless I really force it, and then I'm getting pain through my hip. When I really think about it, I could quite happily just
sit like that.
Like twist. I think probably
to relieve it.
Twist and drop is probably what I do. Twist and drop and sit forward.
Would you say, do you have any evidence, and I know again, we're talking about rotation, it may not be your central focus, but do you have any evidence that your horse's ribcage is potentially
100%.
rotated to the right?
Yes. Yes. In fact, I was saying to you, we were talking about this, he is very much rotated to the right, and I have a classic picture. And I think, well, probably a lot of riders, most of their damage is to the left side, and I think this comes down to, because everything's going right, when they spook or do anything, they're going right, and we come off to the left, and it's generally those sides that take.
And of course, if we're right-handed, it's our less dominant side.
But I find that because left leg is my weaker leg anyway. Obviously, can't get on as well, which I'm aware of now. So my hand takes over, and we do a lot of
hooking the wrist and
subconsciously. And again, to stop that, I have to think. Stop that. But I have very good pictures of my horse.
Yeah. So there are potentially two things going on here, apart from the fact that you're in posterior tilt, which obviously is a problem. And I saw this in saddle fitting with wide seated and wide panelled saddles. If the panels are almost coming off the horse, then rather than it sitting straight and both panels being 3/4 on the horse and straight, physics dictates, and I couldn't tell you the description of it, but I've talked about this with very scientific people who said, yeah, it makes sense, that they'd rather be 100% in contact on one side and 50% on the other. That's a better natural state for things to be in. So if your saddle isn't wide enough for your own seat bones, and that's reasonably common, not that many saddle seats are wide, and they're often wide in the wrong place. So if you have your seat bones wanting to slightly drop off, because obviously most saddle surfaces are slightly curved. So if your seat bones are trying to just slip off, it will A, be potentially uncomfortable, B, the saddle will feel harder. And it's so interesting, you change something, you go, I haven't changed the materials, still the same foam, and they go, it feels softer. But yeah, you will have one seat bone tries to sit on the saddle and the other will be off it. So we become more crooked in the saddle. So the saddle slips, we go even further quite often. And what happens is, and I'm going to have to do another demo, and I see our light is a bit strong here, but if we've got the rib cage tilted here, think about where the rider's leg, in fact I'm going to do that. So this hand is the rider's right, the horse's and rider's right side. It is more vertical. Your leg on this side can drape much more easily. You've got a vertical drop, you haven't got to wrap the leg around in the same way. On this side, you're already slipping, so this hip tightens, left hip tightens and grabs. This whole leg will be grabbing on to try and, it's self-preservation, you're trying to resist centrifugal forces. If the pelvis can resist the centrifugal forces, it will help you keep, a really common correction I do with riders, again I'm not an in-depth biomechanics coach, but let's go, and I'm going to stand sideways. As many riders are, and I'm hoping this shows, they tend to be here. So I'm going to show this from the front, so it's there. So we drift to the right, over that foot, this all comes up and this hip drifts back. So I often will get people, so we're here, and I'll go take this left hip and bring it forward and over your left knee. And I talk about getting the rib cage over the hip, over the knee. You'll never have your hip over the knee, but it's that feel of coming forward over your left knee. And you'll be able to do that much, much better in a saddle that fits your pelvis.
And what is the point of having riding lessons with someone like myself if Because what we're talking about here, we both mentioned it, it's a subconscious thing your brain's doing to try and balance you. If the base of support or the horse's conformation or the horse's current level of training or suppleness means that you're in imbalance, our brains and our nervous system are working for us all the time to put us back in balance, which means we're being moved to a position that classically your riding instructor on the ground doesn't want you in and keeps shouting at you, no, you've slipped to the right, stroke left again, back into the middle of the saddle, so you do, and then your brain starts taking you back up because you can't not.
Well, I find when I was thinking about it yesterday, when I make myself sit, I then jam up through my pelvis, and then my horse gets tense.
Well,
because you're forcing
you're
forcing it. It's not
There's
natural, so you lose that mobility that you actually do.
Again, I think it's Bettina Bialik, I can't be sure, but the explanation for that is that our hands and legs are run by, again, I'm not a scientist, but I think this will be borne out in scientific terms that I don't have access to, but are worked by the conscious part of our brain. So we're taking a contact, we're assessing how good that contact is with our conscious brain, we're putting our leg on or off, it's a conscious decision. When that part of our brain is operating, the unconscious part, which is to do with balance, fixes itself in place.
Yeah.
She gives an example, I think, of imagine you're jogging and it's a cold wet day, you're running along and you have to zip up your jacket. So from one moment you go from consciously thinking about arms and legs and movement to then focusing on core and zipping. And she's at that point, you can all imagine, our body goes tense. Our body goes tense because we're having to think about this, we can't relax. And so there is always a reason why, what you just said, you jam your pelvis when you're thinking about making the corrections you need to your seat. Because you can't have both the pelvis unconsciously relaxed and just doing its micro movements, and your arms and legs and the rest of your body overriding it with your fixes.
Yeah.
And it is why I send so many people, or ask people to, and I understand it's another commitment, another expense, but to work off horse. Because we can start to improve all of these things by getting the right, often it's getting the right muscles firing. So it's an autonomic movement system that keeps us moving automatically. Horses are really strong and they kick in all the time when we run them at the tempo they're most comfortable at, and the falling forward means that tempo is generally too quick for it to be healthy when we ride. So when we take them into the slow walk work or the pressing down when we do rising trot and control the tempo much more without using a hand, then we take them out of the autonomic movement system. That's my understanding of it. So yes, once that pelvis is stabilised, then other muscles are freed up. The nervous system, the neuromechanics have got less work to do. So you get less tired. You don't get the pain and discomfort, of course, that's the biggest silver lining for the rider. But I'm going to talk briefly about the horse as well and how this all affects the horse. But of course, I hope that everybody can start to understand that if you're laterally stable, if you're longitudinally stable and can resist accelerative and decelerative forces, you're less likely to fall.
Of course.
Or even feel like a panic and out of control.
Absolutely.
And so stabilising the pelvis and not locking you in with high pommels, high cankles, big blocks is so much healthier. And they're not doing the same job. It's doing a completely different job. And it's fundamental and it's fixing the cause, it's not fixing the symptoms. It's not fixing the wobble, it's stopping the wobble from happening. So in terms of the horse, we've been talking about the deceleration phase. And this is how we help our horses feel safer. So that deceleration stance phase in the hind leg. Now, this may be disproven again. We're talking about the best current theories that we find is so often what we're talking about.
It's all we can work with.
The science is only ever trying to prove or disprove it as we move forward.
So long as you have an open mind and you're prepared to be corrected when something that's the best we can do.
And we're touching on so many things here, and I'm going to have to break this video up into sections. But so we've had this history of should we fit beyond the back rib or T18? And it's a bit of an obsession in the saddle fitting community. And so we look at big panels, spread the areas as far as possible, but for various reasons, there are limitations on how wide with those panels we can go. And I did talk about that asymmetry with wide panels, that they'd rather shift and sit with one panel properly on the horse. So we can't always go wider. So spreading the weight is our best approach to saddle fitting. So could we go beyond the back rib? Would that give us more area? And so I'm kind of like, let's get away from that, whether it's, the SMS tend to talk about, does the tree leave the horse's back at that point? Well, if it's down to whether the tree leaves at that point, what's the point of the panel? If it's not to spread pressure and weight, which is what so much saddle fitting is obsessed by. So this all starts these kind of thought processes. And much better theory in my mind, which comes from Jean-Luc Corneille and Maria Hellring, is that the psoas muscle comes up under where we sit, basically. I believe is it attachment or insertion point at the front?
No, you're asking me. It's a complicated one because you've got the 3 different components of it.
Yes, the iliopsoas complex.
Yeah.
Okay. So we won't get obsessed.
Anyway.
Yeah, we won't get obsessed by anatomical correctness. But it comes up, it's quite deep because it's under the spine. Of course, we're sitting on top of the spinal processes, then the spine. But it's T15, T16 thereabouts. I think it depends. Horses vary much more than we realise their skeletons. Some of the work going on in dissections is a bit eye-opening. So I'm just checking these lights are still on, cool, because we've been going a while. It's on the microphones. So, psoas has a really important job controlling the pelvis. And we've talked about stance phase, deceleration, compressing the hind joints. And that not necessarily being about collection, but being about helping them carry us better. If we are sitting on the front of the psoas, are they going to be able to control their pelvis fully as they could if we weren't sitting on it? So I think we've got into this thing of let's fit as short as possible. So we are attempting to get the rider slightly in front of T15, T16. It's actually not so much about kidneys, rib cage, and these anatomical markers. So, but it's a really interesting one. So if we can get the rider in the right place on the horse and they can move more effectively, they're going to feel safer. So the best way to sit the rider for the horse is not only all the benefits we talked about for the rider of being in a neutral pelvis with the natural amount of lordosis in their back, which is the hollow of the back. How much do they hollow? And that helps the horse be able to push up because it's meeting less resistance as our discs stack properly. But the almost more important, but equally as important thing is where do we load the rider and how do we load them? And we're never looking at this with saddle fitting about where is the load. We're looking at peak pressures normally.
Okay.
You know,
of course.
you go and look at the research. It's all
it's
about,
all
oh my God, look at that yellow
hot
spot.
spots. Yeah.
We want blue and green and just a bit of red. We don't want any yellow. But instead, let's look at the variations within a pressure testing thing that goes from green to red. That's within kind of okay-ish. So do we want it on the psoas or do we want it somewhere else? And Maria Hellring is absolutely passionate about sitting the rider at the base of the wither. Most saddles sit the rider further back by their very nature, and we then get into should the saddle be on the shoulder? Well, no, most saddles are designed to be off the shoulder, further back, and they sit the rider further back. And there are lots of different permutations, combinations of this. It can get very complicated, but essentially, most saddles that allow the rider to sit further forward will also be designed in such a way that may sit slightly on the shoulder, slightly more or closer to the shoulder. But they will be designed in a way that doesn't carry as much weight over the shoulder. So Ghost has a flexible, squishy panel that sits over the shoulder. A brand I used to fit many years ago, flexible panel saddle, and there are several of them. The panel goes right over the shoulder. And then Ergo X2 that I fit, the way that they're designed and to curve and the way the tree balance is, it doesn't have too much pressure right on the front. So we don't interfere with the shoulder. So then we can sit the rider further forward. And if we make a short panel, then we are getting weight off the psoas.
Well, that's fascinating because when I first sat on, when you first put the Ghost on my pony's back, I was like, well, she's going to push it back soon, isn't she? You put the saddle on, put the saddle on and push it back.
And I've been doing that for 15 years, trying to remember,
and
further forward.
Yeah, you didn't. You just sat it there. And I said, so I'll just get on. And So yes, I am sitting further forward than I have ever sat on any saddle before. The reason why, at the point where I had to make a decision about buying or not, I was willing to go with it, was the work that Gwen had corroborated on Tess. So, which ties all this together. So Tess, my other pony, I say this is the slow, fell pony mare, high croup, long sway back, unwilling to go forward. And my traditional mind that the way you get to go forward is you get those hind legs more active. So we're going up and down hills, we're asking for more forward. Wasn't working. 6-9 months of it. She got fitter, she lost weight, but I didn't change her mechanical movement. And I didn't really alter her top line much either. And it was when I understood the science of motion, Jean-Luc Cornell, and the scientific papers behind that says one of the hind legs create propulsive forces, but it's the area behind the saddle on the horse's back. Those muscles are the muscles which receive those forces and properly can direct and manage them to the rest of the
it's
horse.
like the gearbox and differential.
That's a
it's
good way of
all of that. Does it connect through?
Yeah, so I'd never come across this notion before that the back muscles behind the saddle were the gearbox. Whatever propulsion I was creating by making the hind legs more active, I thought, as I read this, maybe the reason it's not working is because when I look at her conformation, high croup, no muscles behind the saddle. So maybe I should work on that. Maybe if I build those muscles up, that will help. So that's where the groundwork, the lateral work in hand, focusing on you stepping over adduction of front and forelegs, that's what I was working on before Gwen came back. And those were the muscles that you felt.
Noticed the biggest
change. You know, they had that area behind the saddle had filled in and lifted up.
Yeah, quite impressively as well.
Particularly when I'd only really trotted for about 2 minutes and it'd all been walk largely dismounted.
And therefore no hill work at all.
And I stopped all the hill work and all the rest.
Because people think hill work will do it, as you did.
So when you came along and said, here's a saddle and I'm going to sit it here, and my first reaction was, that's madness, it's going to block the shoulders. My next reaction was, oh, hang on a minute, that clears that whole part behind the saddle, the horse's back, that I have learned is key to forward motion. And I mean, it's too soon with the ghost saddle and it's too soon with my 2 ponies in their train to know for sure that I now, I can trot and canter and I've got all the forward that I want. I wouldn't expect that yet, where they are in their training. But the progression is there.
Yeah.
It continues to improve. So that's another big change in what I had been told about where saddles sit on the horse and where you need to sit on the saddle.
And you probably also, you get all of this, needs to be close contact, needs to be narrow twist, probably a monoflap if you can get one because you want to be as close as possible to the horse. But if we sit people down on a wide surface, I've already commented about the knee going forward on a wide rib cage, if we actually lift you and make you potentially feel a little bit perched, particularly until you get used to it, but also that's worse if the saddle's out of balance. So that may be the cause. But if we actually go from here, the horse's rib cage, to putting a saddle on top that allows you to sit more on this shape, then the knee can drop. If your knee's running forward, you're always going to tend to go onto your seat bones. It's always going to be the tendency. With jump saddles, we have to be very careful of that because the foot will be a little bit in front. But how we're helping the horse by the knee dropping is many aspects of it. If the knee drops, I can get your foot beneath your hip. We all talk about shoulder, hip, heel, flat work. And jumping, we can be a bit ahead of that, but often we're a long way ahead of it with the feet way out in front, and that affects jumping position. We climb up the neck, which expends more energy, which puts you more on the forehand as the horse lands. Go back to, if you look at Tamarack Hill Farm, Denny, can't remember his surname, he was an American Olympic rider. He's got some amazing photos of a proper old-fashioned Lucinda Green type jump position where you compress and fold and your bum almost goes backwards. It's much more secure for all of us, and when the horse lands, you're not adding more energy, more load onto the forehand. So let's keep our feet more back underneath us, and then we're more responsible for our own weight. We can use things like this martial arts energy of this using diaphragm, using all of that. And it helps us with the hip obviously as well. You know, all of that is going to keep the foot underneath us. Then the third element, so it's sitting at the base of the wither, sitting with the foot underneath the hip, and then it's inward rotation of the leg. And I think actually I've had a very interesting discussion with Diana about it, Diana Waters, because her experience is that she sees more people forcing inward rotation that they need to relax. But it's interesting that I think forced inward rotation is only allowed in a saddle that isn't correct for you. Oh. So Mary Wanless talks about contact down the thigh, and this is the third element. With some inward rotation, we get the flat of the thigh against the horse, the flat of the bone against the horse. The horse is given something as an into pressure animal. We give it a broad area of pressure for it to push up into. A lot of classical type trainers, biomechanics trainers, will talk about forming a tunnel with your thighs for the horse to move through. We can control direction with the thigh if we have good contact. If you've gone for, say, a narrow twist saddle and a narrow waist, and the two are a little bit interchangeable and it's a bit complicated, but you've got the pubic arch at the top, and then you've got the hip construction. How wide apart do they go? And does it then leave a bit of a gap? Or are your hips tight? Your pelvis might be wide and your hips tight, in which case there's no gap at all. There's a complex interplay at this point. So right in our sort of knicker crease through the upper thigh. Mary Wallace talked about when she first started working with upper level riders, and she'd try and get her hand under their thigh and she wouldn't be able to get it under. Now whether that's good or bad, that much pressure, I'm not going to comment too much. However, if you're trying to close your thigh and get that tunnel, if your leg only truly hits at the knee and you've got a gap here, you're going to pinch with your knees. So you end up overly internally rotated and you pinch with your knees. If you have the right support under the upper thigh, from the waist of the saddle, whatever you want to call it, then the knees cannot pinch.
That makes complete sense.
And it's not uncommon for me to pad up under either the skirt in the saddle. Ghosts don't have a skirt, but Ghost actually have the panel there that gives a certain amount of support. But from wanting to sit the rider a bit narrower by lifting them to let the leg drop, we also need to fill any gaps. So that excess inward rotation is in fact knee pinching because of lack of support.
Absolutely, and that's actually how my saddle feels to me. Because I'm a tall rider on short ponies, I've always had a problem with leg aids because, you know, my lower legs, by that stage the pony spiral is turning inwards, and I have nothing. I mean, the amount of contortion I would have to do to get my lower leg on, and I still haven't largely fixed that, but I have just naturally been aiding more with top of my legs. Again, I think that this corollaries with training the horse on the ground. If it's easy, it's probably right. This is in terms of a rule of thumb, it's not a bad one. But if you're having to strain or stress, or it feels uncomfortable, or there's a about something, step back. It's probably not you. It's probably not your horse. You know, and I think that's the area we're talking about here, isn't it? That in between where we've just had so little guidance, so little expertise, and now that expertise is coming forth, and I think it's massively encouraging because you can do something about it, and there's no judgment around it.
If we were in any other sport, and I always see even schooling in correct flat work horsemanship, there are two sides to it. There is our side where we're looking for just incremental improvement and enjoying our horses. There's competitive dressage. But if we tackle it from the competitive dressage point of view, it's a sport. There's no other sport where we wouldn't get the absolute best kit for that person in that instance. Now the challenge is that with horses, it's the best saddle for that rider on that horse.
So the permutations are just multiplied.
So it's not necessarily that you'll even be able to take that same saddle, and if you had two very similarly fitting horses on the top in terms of tree fit, width and so on, if their rib cages are different shapes and they move in a different way, it still may not be perfect for you, and that becomes very expensive. So we try and look at using a bit of padding, using a bit of a shortcut for this horse. Maybe, I mean, I've got a lovely customer up in Aberdeenshire who's incredibly educated, and she shows me her, you know, Heath Robinson saddle pads that she uses under a TCS at the moment, and she gives herself a knee block in the saddle pad because she realises that this soft internal/external rotation often leaves the knee slightly off the horse. Because the horse is round and we're not. We have a straight line. So the knee is often slightly off the horse. So she's created. And it's not a knee block in front of the knee.
She just filled that space, so there's a contact.
So you have contact all the way down, because if you are supported from one knee all the way around to the other knee, you are almost unbudgeable.
And that's where you get this the notion of invisible ease.
Yes.
Because, I mean, yes, there's skill, yes, there's education, but also just the physics of the space between you and the horse, the time it takes to apply an aid. If you're continually there and the horse is feeling you continually there, it doesn't look like anything when you're moving or tightening a muscle. And then that's what we're...
Because look at all those wonderful things that we're taught. Feel when each leg is coming off the ground. We can feel that a lot better if you're in really good contact and stable and soft and your pelvis is opened.
Although I would say that's the other missing element. Do you meet many riders who can feel when each leg are moving?
No, not at all. But if they've been sitting in saddles that completely block them and they can't stabilise in,
then how could they? How would they?
Their sensory system is just not going to be able to. It hasn't got the right inputs for a start, and it doesn't have the right understanding and processing to be able to interpret those inputs, even if it had them.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're getting so many more inputs now from that saddle.
Absolutely.
And it's proprioceptive, it's neuromechanical.
And it's tiny. It's tiny, it's small, which is back to safety, confidence.
Because your brain will feel safe, so your brain will make better decisions.
I think so. Time will tell. I mean, I've had this saddle, 2-3 months now? But I mean...
And it's never going to be perfect. We're going to be tweaking. Horses change shape all the time, which will affect how you sit. And then if you, I don't know, you know, you've gone out and you've gone for a long walk and you haven't realised that you've actually strained something, and you carry on riding, and you will affect the horse if you're not tip-top. And so we have little setbacks. And the saddle won't be fitting quite as well because something's happened. But we look at horse saddle rider and go, so what's changed? And it's not this, you know, as a saddle fitter, I'm a bit defensive about it because we do get blamed, but what changed to make the saddle no longer fit?
Of course, absolutely.
Whereas it's much easier, much easier spending the money to go, oi, saddle fitter, you fitted the wrong saddle.
Do you find that people blame kit rather than themselves?
People blame everything.
And again, because it's shameful to, we don't have a healthy way of saying it was my fault, but I'm going to change.
No, and I think you get the people that blame everything, and then you get the other ones that are overly critical and blame themselves too much. But I think people don't look at how much the shape of the horse changes, even in an 8-week period from when they're coming, like this time of year, maybe a bit earlier, but where they're coming back into work from the winter. Then suddenly up to work. And I won't, saddle fitting is not my area at all, but I will say, generally having a look, have we had our saddle checked? Well, he's going to change shape anyway.
So what's the point in having it checked now?
What's the point in having it checked now? Like, now's the most important point because you're at your building stage, so you need everything. Otherwise, what are you building on? And well, tiff disc in particular, if that gets damaged, it's
that's the little tiny muscles alongside the spine.
That'll switch itself off and won't come back into play again until you do. I can switch it back on. I can't think of the right word. Activate that. But then, if we're not getting the saddle fixed and it's continuing to do whatever it's doing, then we're not getting multifidus, and that's not so. What is the point in these 8 weeks of work? Because you're building something not useful.
I think maybe the elephant in the room, as I try and understand that approach from clients, is money. People are always aware, all of us cost, and the more we turn up, the more it costs, and I understand that, as I try and think about, not a solution, but a way to accept and deal with that issue, assuming we're all worth our money, which I believe we are, is I think it does come back to this parameters of success again. If you define your success as you have to get to that competition, or you have to go on that fun ride, or if you're not riding at all for a while, you're a failure, then you're going to feel immense pressure not to take the time out. If you can't afford to get your saddle changed, or your saddle check is still 8 weeks away and you can't afford to bring it forward, well, stop, do some groundwork. Do some groundwork. And I think all of us as an equestrian community could support that by saying, why can't we have yard competitions for, I don't know, balance? Why can't we have yard competitions for the most improved back? Why can't we? There's so much. I think we as female, middle-aged equestrians are working to someone else's model. I think we're working to the model of male competitive riders. And that whole paradigm of success. And I don't think our horses thank us for it.
I think there's very much a divide. I don't know if it's more just now as things are, because we're very much in a transition, everybody's finding their own way, aren't they? But you have those that are horse focused, and then those that are I want to ride at whatever.
And it's not that they don't love their horses.
No, absolutely not. But they have their personal goal, and you can't beat them up for it. That's what they want to do. But to get to that stage, everyone, and things change so much. Like the horse you had 2 years ago is not the horse that you've got now, and is it capable of getting to that? But get that, and then you have the horse people who are very much like, my horse isn't right, so I'm not going there. And if we get to competing or doing whatever, then that's where we get to. But there's not an end goal.
One of the
as such
slight pushes back I make to that, and one of the reasons I'm willing to sort of sit on something, a forum as public in this and talk in this way, is that yes, but those who are focused on personal success and personal goals are currently undermining potentially all of our right to continue to own and ride horses. Because take that to the nth degree, I'm not suggesting it's sort of the rider in the yard down the road that wants to go to a fun ride, but we know what's happened at the top of dressage. We've seen what's happened in eventing. Racing actually, perversely, may well have made most progress in this area, but you're flinching.
So there's a long way to go. But again, they are, I think, in every discipline, everyone is trying in their own way to make their own changes and do better.
As long as those changes are genuine and are not, there's a lot of whatever washing, SLO washing going on, some lip service in places.
Maybe it's time for the constituents, the clients that we deal with, the people, amateur owners, to actually, we have a say too. And if our hobby, our passion, it's not hobby, our way of life is potentially threatened by the behaviour of others via SLO, then I think we've got a right to actually sort of call people out a little bit.
I'm broadly with you, and I'm probably going to wrap this up by saying, if we started on confidence, safety, security, shame, then there are some interesting debates from some amazing traditional horsemen saying, well, of course you need a chiffney if you're not going to be safe, and of course you need this, and it's absolutely, it's not abuse, and that's where there's SLO debate on the management side particularly, or in bitting up a horse because it's too strong and it's dangerous. If things had been done differently, there would be no threat, or much less threat to safety. Therefore, we would not need to use these abusive methods, because we would never get to that position. Horse feels safe, rider feels safe. We hardly ever then get to those head-butting moments where
horses don't want to be.
And I think that's the ground we're trying to cover, isn't it?
So if we bred them, broke them, I hate that term, but started them, brought them on, bought kit for them, developed their management so that the horse felt safe, we would all be more confident, we would be less defensive over what we've done with horses, less defensive over our past, because we've all done stuff
Absolutely.
we regret. And that's the shame.
You can't hold your hands up.
That's the shame. We've all done it. All we can do is just move forward, one foot in front of the other, and just keep chipping away. This has been just the most fantastic conversation.
We could go on all day.
We could talk all day. If there's anything from this conversation that you find really interesting, I don't know how much. Once I've moved up here, we'll probably be able to do a bit more face to face. But the three of us, maybe others, be delighted to chat through other things with our own perspective. But I hope that's brought safety, security, confidence, and shame into a new light for you, and how, you know, we can work on ourselves emotionally, we can do all sorts of things to help ourselves deal with that, but ultimately, actually, if we deal with our horses in a different way, then we will be safer, we will be more secure, we'll be more confident, and we don't have to face shameful situations. So, thank you, Pauline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you.
We'll do it again, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too long, and you enjoyed it as much as we did. Bye. Brilliant.
Yeah, lovely.
Oh,